Hi, I'm Meshal Malik, and you're watching Indus Special. Now, for centuries, humans have found and sought ways to predict the future. But even in the present day, the fascination and urge to know what happens next has helped create a massive global industry. The psychic industry continues to bloom and grow, with horoscope columns in daily newspapers to tarot card readers connecting with people over the internet. But what really lies behind the business of predicting the future? And how has it changed in the modern age? That's our discussion today. Joining us to talk about it is Marium, Aftab, a tarot card reader, child psychologist, and clinical hypnotherapist, joining us in the Lahore studios. Also joining us, Dr. Dagnall, who's a reader in applied cognitive psychology, joining us from Manchester. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to this show. Dr. Dagnall, I'd like to begin with you. Now, as I stated, this business of predicting the future has been around for centuries. But how do you think it has evolved or significantly changed in the modern age?
One of the changes in contemporary society is that the traditional religions have declined, so many societies have become more secular. As societies have become more secular, what's happened is New Age philosophies have emerged, and that means that people look for new opportunities to validate their existence and to be able to understand the world. Within that, of course, horoscopes and the ability to predict the future via fortune telling, they're becoming increasingly popular. Together with also with the mass media now, people's lives are filled with great uncertainty and a lack of predictability. So one of the things that astrology, psychic abilities offers them is it offers them some opportunity to resolve those uncertainties.
Right. Dr. Dagnall, now you mentioned the new way, you mentioned how there is this want to predict the future even more so now. But when we're talking about the general threats, the age of rationality and what came during that, the questions of science that brought about, questioning all these methods. Do you think now there is more space given to the psychic industry in society by those who were critics?
With the blossoming of the digital age, there's a whole range of ideas that are now much more accessible. So if you look at psychic abilities, people have always been interested in them, going back to the birth of modern science and particularly the development of psychology. That was why parapsychology developed from spiritualism and an interest in life after death and an interest then in psychic abilities. So what you tend to have now is you have the opportunity that people through the internet, they can look for information about psychic abilities. In the past, information on psychics was quite confined. I mean, in the UK, we used to have documentaries. One of the famous ones is the BBC Horizon series, and they would talk about psychic abilities. Now it's possible to go on the internet, look at things like YouTube, and see lots of examples of psychics at work. So I think that helps to promote the idea that psychic abilities exist.
Right. Ms. Marium Aftab, let me jump to you now. Right. With everything that we've been talking about, the questions that come up when we talk about the psychic industry. Now, you are a tarot card reader, but you are also a child psychologist. Those seem to be two very different things. People might not understand how those two concepts can come together.
No.
Can you give us a take on that?
I think in my journey, in my psychic journey, as you may call it, I think being a child psychologist has helped me. Because whenever I take a tarot spread, the most accurate thing which comes out is a child's ability. A child's ability, if he has more stars in the athletic house, then you can actually train them to be athletes. I remember when I was young, my mother was very interested in these things, and she took me to a psychic abroad, and he predicted that I had athletic abilities, which I couldn't see. So what she did, I started playing golf and I started excelling and I started winning it. So I thought that was very sensible of her. And then he also predicted that I would go in the psychic industry. And in Pakistan, psychic industries is really looked down upon. They call them Najumis, and it's not very well-respected things. But I still remember we were used to go for zikr, and the training started then. I think a lot of credit goes to the guy who predicted the abilities at the age of 9. And then my mother taking them on and actually training them for it.
Right. So, Ms. Aftab, this is also another question that many critics would put forth. Self-fulfilling prophecy. You tell a child that they're going to become an athlete in the future. They don't see it, but then they start pursuing that line. Is that what being a psychic is about?
No. Psychic is about, you see, it's your 5 senses, and then the extension of the 6th sense is called the psychic ability. So if you're gifted with the 6th sense, then you can probably, 6th sense has nothing to do with logic. A lot of people say that, you know, you read mind, you do face reading. No. I would give you an example. When you write poetry, now poetry flows and it comes. You can't sit, okay, I'm going to write a poem. It flows and you write. Like this, psychic energy, it flows. It can be completely illogical and then completely accurate. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the craft.
Right. It's all very fascinating to hear. And I want to jump to Dr. Dagnall again and ask him about his experiences as a professional in this industry. Dr. Dagnall, take us through it. What do you do?
Well, our approach is to be compassionate skeptics, which mean that we ourselves don't believe in the existence of psychic abilities, but we're not there to denigrate other people's views. Certainly, as your other guest said, one of the things that's associated with psychic abilities is different perceptions of the world and different attributions for why things happen. We have devised scales, for example, that look at, alongside Harvey Irwin, who's an eminent parapsychologist, which look at the reasons why people attribute things to the paranormal. So, first stage in that model is to notice something unusual. So if you don't notice something unusual, there's no attribution to be made. If you then notice something, it's then whether you try to explain it using a logical, rational explanation, or whether you then start to be informed by your beliefs, so that your beliefs then ascribe a paranormal explanation to what's happened. So there's a large element of belief in, as you said before, self-fulfilling prophecy. It's difficult to disentangle that. Now, I'm not saying psychic abilities don't exist. I'm just saying that whenever people make claims that there are psychic abilities, other people will come back and produce studies that don't support their claims. So in terms empirically, it's very difficult to test psychic abilities and then to replicate them. For those sorts of differences, we've centered more on people's individual perspectives. So not whether the beliefs exist or not, but what their experiences of the beliefs are and what sort of paranormal factors and correlates are associated with them.
And what correlations can you find in your studies here when you're saying that some people find manifestations of paranormal activity and therefore their beliefs in psychic powers perhaps are strengthened? Are there any correlations, any links you can find?
Well, going back to the early research, Gertrude Schmelder, who devised the notion of sheep and goats, sheep are people who believe in the paranormal and goats are skeptics, found that people who were responsive to the idea of paranormal belief, sheeps, they performed much better on psychic tests. So one of the attributes, obviously, that's associated with psychic ability or belief in the paranormal is openness to experience. People are much more open in the way they see the world. Also, you'll find correlations with schizotypy. Schizotypy we view it as being a personality dimension, which mirrors some of the symptoms or some of the characteristics of schizotypy, but in a very attenuated form. And what you find is that people who believe in the paranormal are also more creative. They're more open to their experiences. And at the same time, they draw more on intuitive thinking. You used the word before, rational thinking. Well, these people have a preferred style towards intuitive, subjective experiences. They put much more weight on their personal experiences within the world and see them as more important than, say, empirical evidence.
Right. So as we're talking about the industry as a whole, we do know when we talk about an industry, there are many people who are in it to make business, right? And you mentioned a specific word, people who are gifted, a specific phrase I should say, people who are gifted with the sixth sense. Now in this, how would you tell your viewers to make distinctions between people who are actually gifted and people who, let's say, are just in it for the business?
You see, in every business, because there's no qualification for it, but I think to be a superstar in any business, you have to be gifted. Whether it be acting, whether it be singing, whether it be anything, when it's a gift, is then when you really make a name. And when repeatedly, if you you nowadays Google and you see, and the word of mouth is a very big thing for you to, if you were to go to a doctor, you would ask suggestions, right? So, when I do a tarot reading, what I've done now is that if I see a gift in a person, and I feel that they do have this sixth sense, so then we have telepathic workshops, we teach tarot card readings, and we impart knowledge. But if anybody is insisting that they want to learn tarot reading, and I feel they don't have, plus you have to have other, you have to have patience, you have to have a certain kind of a temperament, and you have to be honest. So then I don't take those people.
Why are those two qualities important? You specifically mentioned
You see, because a lot of people who come for a reading are people who are disturbed. Mostly it's your love life, and they, the hormones are playing up and they're very, very disturbed. They're angry. So if you don't understand where they're coming from, it could be very, 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 very taxing to deal with it.
So let me try to also make sense of this. And I'm trying to unravel and, try to understand what you're saying on my own terms. Could we say that psychic readers are also just really good therapists?
Not at all.
Okay.
Okay. But, if you've given a psychic reading, that's one part. The next part is a little bit of therapy also. This book, Journey of Insights, is a classic example of it. What is intuitive and how therapy is fixed into it. It's like the first chapter is called The Turning Point. There was a guy who could not become a doctor. It was not destined, but his family wanted him to be. And he had attempted suicide. And he came to me when his stomach had been washed. So all the family wanted to know whether he's going to become or not, and to be a bearer of a bad news I would rather avoid that, but I told them. Now, to train those families, I had to tell them that this is his talent, interior decoration. And today he's very, very successful. So do your psychic thing, and then you can, of course, give them healing and give them a direction. You just can't tell them no. And then they need to have a direction also.
Right. Now I want the flip side of all of this, and I want Dr. Dagnall's viewpoint on this. How powerful is the mind in this? The human mind in making something happen, in making the person believe that it's real, feeling like they're helpless, but someone telling them that no, there is a solution, and then them walking towards it.
Again, going back to the psychological correlates of belief in the paranormal and psychic abilities, one of the key attributes of that is empowerment, if you like, the idea that people can take control of their physical environment, their external environment. And even if there aren't psychic powers, then potentially there's positivity that comes from believing that you have a destiny, that your future is mapped out for you. That gives you a purpose, that gives you a drive, that gives you the ability to make decisions and perhaps even to shape your destiny. So psychologically, of course, that could be quite empowering.
Let me just understand this a little more. Now, you're saying that it's empowering to know that there is some normal activity in the universe, and that, creates optimism within a person. A person on the other end of the spectrum would say it's completely the other way around. Knowing that everything is in your control would actually drive you to doing certain things.
Of course, and that is the caveat. That's the alternative negative possibility. I was just responding to the notion that it could also be positive. It could also be quite constraining in terms of the fact that it defines how you think the world's going to turn out. So like you said, it could end up in a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. Ms. Marium Aftab, as you mentioned, a lot of people who come are, of course, disturbed. Tell us how you mix both of these things together and how you help them on a personal level. How does that work?
You see, like I just explained, the chapter turning point is, look, things you cannot change, you accept them, and things you can change, you should make an effort towards changing them. Right? So this is the key to my readings, and it's always been that I've given them the psychic reading, but then I want to give them my direction which will heal them. So I think it's mostly I do my readings like that.
Okay, just another question to you. A lot of what we're seeing in terms of horoscopes, in terms of astrology, is so generalized. We see a person's horoscope, a Taurus, I'm a Taurus, so a reading for an entire population. How do we deal with something like that?
You see, my speciality is in tarot cards, but I always is helpful to take the date of birth. To me, character sketch of I'm a Capricorn, it's quite true. But in form of predictions, I use my tarot cards. Like I would say, Taurians are extremely loyal, extremely stubborn. They don't, they're general things, and it's right for them.
Right.
Okay. And they're very career-oriented, very focused, because I'm also an Earth star. But what is going to happen to them is on a personalized based on tarot cards. So if anybody does not have a date of birth accurate, we can still go with the reading. But if they do, then I understand how they would relate to their problems, because there's one problem can be related very differently with different sort of people.
Right. So when people claim that this is a general thing for everyone, that shouldn't be taken.
No, because I'm not traditionally an astrologer.
Right.
I am more into tarot. I know astrology, but I base my reading mostly on tarot. But character sketch of those 12 flowers is very helpful, very, very helpful.
Right. Dr. Neil Dagnall, just another question to you before we start wrapping up the segment. Now, you mentioned how, the bloom and why this industry is growing. You mentioned several factors for it. I want to talk a little about the socio-political, economic factors that might be leading to it, the uncertain times. Do you think that feeds into this growth?
Previous studies over the years, psychological studies, have found that during times of great uncertainty, that belief in paranormal, supernatural forces increases. I mean, one of the other things that makes psychic abilities quite commonly reported is the fact that people are much more open to belief in things like extrasensory perception and being able to see the future than they are with more extreme paranormal beliefs, because they fit in with people's experience of the everyday world. So certainly when people feel uncertain, when they can't predict how things are going to turn out, looking towards horoscopes and looking towards fortune telling can provide them with some answers, well, some psychological answers and some reassurance.
Right. Ms. Marium Aftab, just before now segment, what message would you like to give out as a professional who does this, also a psychologist? What message would you give out for people who are battling with things, always trying to struggle, trying to find a way out in terms of predicting the future? What do you think is important to remember?
I would give that if your belief in goodness and your belief in hard work is strong, things will happen the right way. It's the belief and it's the manifestation of the positivity, which is absolutely very important. Right. No negative thinking.
Right. That's an important note, and we're going to end the segment on that. Thank you so much, Ms. Marium Aftab, for joining us here in the Lahore studios. Dr. Neil Dagnall for joining us from Manchester. We're going to go for a short break. When we return, we take a closer look at the far-reaching impacts of sleeping disorders. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Now, sleep is essential for human survival. It's one of the basic needs for a healthy functioning of a person. And yet, millions of people around the world suffer from sleeping disorders. On today's show, we take a closer look at how important sleep is for the human health and the ways in which people can deal with sleeping disorders. Joining us for the show today is Yasir Ali, who's a therapist associated with the San Diego Sleep Clinic in San Diego in the United States. He joins us from Lahore. Also joining us in the Lahore studios is Adnan Farooq, who's a fitness consultant at Shapes, which is a fitness club in Pakistan, and Professor Athol Johnston, a clinical pharmacologist, joining us from London. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to the show. Yasir, let me begin with you. Now, we're going to be talking about sleeping disorders, but before we move on to that, let's talk about sleep and how essential that is for the conscious and subconscious mind. Take us through it.
So, I mean, sleep's it's a very important part of who we are as human beings. I think at the end of the day, when we're coming back to our resting places, it's very vital for our bodies to rest, to really make sense of everything that has happened throughout the day. So really, it's about taking all that in conscious material and processing it while we sleep.
And when you're saying that we process it during our sleep, what do you exactly mean by it? How does the subconscious mind grapple with the complex ideas and realities of our daily lives?
It's really an automatic process. I think throughout the day we get so caught up in our days that we really forget to check in with our bodies and how we're feeling. And really, sleep is one of the ways that the body really alerts us and really facilitates us in rest.
Right. Professor Athol John, now we are talking about sleeping disorders, and we just heard how important sleep is. In all of this, how do you see numbers changing over the years? We're seeing our lifestyles become more stressful. We're seeing working hours become longer. We're seeing many social political issues come up. That's, of course, feeding into the problem. How are we seeing this end up in terms of medication people are taking?
Well, the medication people are taking has changed over the years. Years ago, we started off with barbiturates, and then we went on to benzodiazepines, and now the latest hypnotics are the Z drugs, Zopiclone, and drugs like that. All of them have their problems, and really should only be used for a short term. You need to address insomnia really in terms of what you're doing, the stress in your life, whether you're using your iPad and your phones late at night, because light affects how you sleep, and your interaction between light and your eyes is really important.
Right. Adnan, we've been talking about this, and we're trying to get to how sleep is being impacted by our lifestyles. Right. Do you see a change in the people you're dealing with when they have stressful lifestyles? Do you see a change in their sleeping patterns? Do you hear complaints about it? Is there any link between it?
Absolutely. I mean, we deal with a lot of people on a daily basis, and these people are consciously taking decisions to become more healthy. But I would say the tragedy is that, the fitness industry, we're not talking a lot about the importance of sleep. Mm-hmm. So the fitness industry, I believe, needs to underline and underscore the importance of sleep as a part of the entire wellness regime.
And how important is it for that wellness regime?
It's a game changer.
Really?
That's the word that comes to mind, because if you want it, because most people in the fitness industry, at least in Pakistan, they want weight loss. The majority of people will come to a gym with a specific weight loss goal in mind. So if you have a weight loss goal, and that's what I teach and preach, and we talk to our trainers as well, that if your sleep cycle is disturbed, there's no way that you're going to be achieving your goals because your metabolism is linked with your sleep. So in other words, the adrenal and the thyroid, they get a chance to perform well because they've been, they're being used excessively due to stress and all that is, happening in our lives. So when you sleep well, you give a chance to these hormones and all these glands to regenerate and recuperate, and that's linked to metabolism and just general sense of
so the physical goals that a person has, it's essential for them to have sleep in their regimen in order for them to move towards that goal, to hit those goals.
Absolutely.
Right. Yasir, jumping back to you, now what do you feel like are some of the most common reasons for why we're seeing sleeping disorders so prevalent these days?
I think it's the general stress of our modern living, and not to bash on modern living. It's just we've gotten really busy with our schedules. We don't have like Adnan said, working out's such an important part of living a healthy lifestyle, and with that really means that we've really sort of taken our bodies for granted. And not just our physical health, but our psychological health as well. So it's really that it's really that not really taking care of our psychological health, not noticing how our body feels, and frankly, for most people, it's about finding that time in their busy schedules, which I feel is one of the reasons why somebody could be experiencing difficulty with sleep.
Right. Yasir, you mentioned here not noticing how bodies feel. Now, how can a person actually identify when they have a sleeping disorder? I mean, we all have bouts of depression, or we all have bouts of bad days where we can't sleep. But when can a person say, all right, now I'm suffering from a sleeping disorder, I need to get professional help for it?
If let's say somebody's experiencing sleep apnea, and really what sleep apnea is shortness of breath while they're sleeping, they feel that they run out of breath while they're sleeping and they have to wake up. Other flags could be just racing thoughts, right before going to bed. Somebody feels that they just can't shut their mind off. That's also another red flag, and it has gone on for not just a week, but a couple of weeks and maybe months. And, there are people, unfortunately, who suffer these symptoms for years. Right.
Professor Athol Johnston, we're talking about prolonged sleeping deprivation when people start noticing that, they actually have a problem. When do you think does it become essential to actually start taking medicine for something like this?
Well, there's several things have come up in the last two speakers, and one being, of course, that weight loss is important because you need to keep your weight down. If you get fat, the chance of you having sleep apnea increases. This is when you keep waking up during the night because you stop breathing and then you wake yourself. It wakes you up and you get sleep. And the trouble is, if you don't sleep properly, you tend to put on weight, which is ironic. So you need to get your weight down and keep your weight down. When do you need to start taking drugs? Well, if you do take drugs, you want to try and keep them to a shorter period of time and not become dependent upon them, because they lose their effect with time. They don't do what you want them. They don't send you to sleep. So most GPs in this country, it's recommended that they don't prescribe drugs for more than about 2 weeks, and you try and get over the problems that you're getting and try and adjust your life so your mind isn't racing when you go to bed and you're not worrying about things. I know that's easier said than done, but it really is what you need to do. You need to get your life under control rather than relying on pharmaceuticals.
Right. Adnan talked about how important sleep is for the weight loss journey, but also exercise has been linked to helping with stress and depression. Take us through how essential that is.
Exercise is, when you have a structured exercise program, if you're reasonably physically active and you're watching what you eat, that's going to really help in your sleep cycle, and not only that, but overall general health. So it's critical that, there's a direct link, like Professor said, that, it's leading to weight issues.
Right.
Now, people are finding it, at least in this country, people are finding it difficult to understand the link. Usually the general perception is that, weight gain is a function of not moving much and eating a lot more.
Right.
But there are other factors, and sleep happens to be one of them. So we talk to our clients, and like I said, trying to make them understand that it's about the other factors as well.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think we're moving towards having a healthy conversation about weight loss, about how our bodies should feel? I mean, for a very long time, it was all about the aesthetics.
Yes.
That if you're of a certain age, if you're in a certain profession, that's when you need to be working out, that's when you need to look good. Do you think that conversation is changing?
It is in some circles, but predominantly it still remains, the outside thing, the aesthetics. So, I mean, yes, people are waking up to the fact that, they've got to be much more healthier and lead a healthy life if they want disease prevention, so to speak. There's diseases now rampant. You talk about any person, and they've got either, cholesterol issue or a blood pressure issue or something of that sort.
Right.
So what I try to do is I always try to link their health with their short-term goals. So I would, in other words, I'd say that, if you want to look better, you've got to first feel better and not the other way around. So focus on improving your health through lifestyle changes. That in effect, in essence, is going to improve your, that's going to help you lose weight. You'll feel better, you'll feel younger, you'll be more energetic. So all these benefits need to be underlined. Unfortunately, what the fitness industry, again, I'm restricted to Pakistan, is we as a fitness industry, we aren't talking much about these things. So a client would come in and they'd say, this is what I want. These are my weight loss goals, and unfortunately, most of the stuff.
There wasn't a deeper conversation being had about the reasons why that's important to be done. I get your point there, Yasir. On a similar issue now, this is about fitness. What I was talking to Adnan about fitness, about how you look, but also about how you feel. But we know the conversation about mental health hasn't always been so positive. Sleeping disorders are highly linked to a person's mental state. Do you think that conversation is changing? Do you think there is more access to mental health for people?
Yeah, I think the conversation's happening. Just the fact that we are here. We're not just talking about psychological interventions, but we're also talking about in terms of a lifestyle change. Just mental health in itself is not the answer. Obviously, we need to look at all these different aspects as well. So pharmacological intervention and lifestyle changes. There is a lot of support in Pakistan, not specifically for sleep disorders, but in general for mental health. There is still support there. When somebody comes in with a sleep disturbance, they need to put in a lot of work as well. Sure, you can pop a pill. Sure, you can hire a coach. But really, it all comes down to that individual and how willing they are to address their problems.
Right, Professor Johnston. I just want to talk about the pharmaceutical industry here and talk about how over-the-counter drugs are promoted for specifically quick fixes like this. What regulations do you think need to be strengthened, need to be put in order for people to find more long-term solutions to issues and also prevent adverse side effects when we're talking about sleeping disorders specifically?
Yasir has got it right. And you need to get your life under control rather than getting on with drugs. In the United Kingdom, you can't get a strong hypnotic except by going to a doctor and getting a prescription. We've got several over-the-counter products For example, night nurse, it's a cold remedy, but it's got an antihistamine in it that makes you sleepy. And it's really a low-grade hypnotic. It will aid your sleep, but it won't knock you out in the same way a benzodiazepine or a zopiclone might do. So it's not in the same strong. I don't think there's any great problem about taking those occasionally. But again, you shouldn't be taking them every night. You have a problem if you're taking them every night.
Right. Yasir, what other ways are there to deal with something like this? What other innovations or innovative methods are there? We heard about exercise. We heard about pills. Are there any new methods to deal with sleeping disorders?
So, in addition to medicine and to exercise, there's also a lot of little things that you can do. So, one of the things that we really educate our clients is about improving their sleep hygiene, and what that really means is treating your bedroom, treating your bed or the place of rest as a more or less a sacred space, a place where you come to rest, because most of we're in the habit of being on the screen 30-40 minutes before bed, or even before bed, in some cases in the middle of the night, waking up, checking our messages. So really it's about treating your sleep with respect. It's about realizing that the sleep is there to really provide nutrition to our body, and that's the time when our body really recovers. Something specific that someone can do if they're experiencing restlessness or racing thoughts right before sleep is just to journal them down. Just write everything down that comes to your mind before bed, so that your mind is completely exhausted and it's out there, and really there's nothing left to do but to rest.
Right.
There's also sure. Okay.
Yasir, just since you're talking about writing things down and the importance of sleep, also another thing that does come up, and often it's seen as a question whether this was a good night's sleep or not, is the idea of bad dreams. When you have them, you have a disturbed night. Is that a good thing, having those dreams for the subconscious mind to process things?
Well, I mean, it depends on the dream. If you enjoy horror movies, then I'm sure that's not a bad dream. But if somebody wakes up and their sleep is disturbed by it, then sure, it can be a very uncomfortable experience. And again, just realizing, just sort of grounding yourself at that time. Right. Doing something simple, breathing meditation could help.
Right. On that point of meditation, now, how important is the mind-body connection when you're exercising or doing anything of the sort for like a healthy functioning? There's, of course, yoga. There are many other exercises that are not hardcore exercises.
Yes.
How important are those?
They go both hand in hand, because you see, what the state of the mind has an impact on the physical state of the human, and vice versa. So I believe that exercise with all its benefits and the right kind of nutrition, but one also has to install some, I call them rituals of stress management, so to speak, and they also help in improving sleep, and we've seen that in our clients as well. And these are something really basic stuff, like taking an outdoor walk, not necessarily brisk walk, just like a stroll in the park, because when you connect with nature, that has its documented benefits, right? And then there's the 5,000-old yogic practice of deep breathing. I mean, most of us are not familiar to these kinds of things.
Right.
But if you start off with something like maybe a minute or two of deep breathing, just relaxing, or the mere practice of giving yourself the time of the gift of just being alone, because most of us, from the time we wake up to the time we retire, we're in a state of we're in a state of rush. We're rushing from one thing to the other, and it's a give situation. So by the end of the day, we're exhausted. So I say, and I practice that myself. And I had sleep issues myself, and that worked wonderfully, because the giving yourself, say, maybe 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever that means to you, is the practice of allowing yourself to ease down and understand and maybe introspect a little. So the mind muscle or the mind and body connection, it goes hand in hand. So there's your fitness regime on one side, there's nutrition, and then there's the mental rituals, as I call them.
That's a great point, and I'm going to end the show on that point. Having certain rituals, certain moments or opportunities where you can reflect on your inner self, try to deal with things, process things in a manner which allows you to do so in this routine that you have that is so busy and full of activities. Thank you so much, Adnan Farooq, for joining us, Yasir Ali for joining us from Lahore, and Professor Athol Johnston for joining us from London. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again next time with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.